Hello and welcome. This is Palan, and you are listening to Stuck in the Middle, a podcast that looks at the psychology of uncertainty, the quiet strength of ambivalence, and the choices that shape who we are. If you are navigating life's uncertainties, those moments of doubt, change, or growth, then you are in the right place. Because sometimes life isn't black or white, it's lived in shades of gray. We believe that in the context of ideas, we find clarity and the perspectives to move forward. Join us in this ongoing, meaningful conversation. Subscribe now and tap the bell icon. The Malaysian talent question. Malaysia does not lack talent. What we struggle with is how talent is recognized, supported, and rewarded. There are three guiding principles. Talent is well distributed, opportunity is not. Capability must be built early, and of course, reinforced often. And finally, inclusivity strengthens competitiveness, it doesn't dilute it. In many systems, raw ability and recognized talent are not the same. Some people have ability, they work hard, and they do everything right, yet never become visible talent. So the real question isn't degree versus skills, it's who gets seen, who gets guided, and who gets the chance to belong. That is the Malaysian talent question. And to discuss this subject today, we have an outstanding guest with us, Ibrahim Sani, the Chief Executive Officer of Yayasan Peneraju, or the Leadership Academy. He brings together a wealth of experience, public policy, media, talent development, and now leads one of the agencies tasked with the talent development on building Bumiputra capability across education, skills, and professional pathways. That combination of perspective makes him as the most suited and most qualified to engage with what we are discussing today, the Malaysian talent question. Welcome to the podcast, Encik Ibrahim.
Thank you very much, Sansri. It's very honored and privileged to be here discussing this with you.
Thank you for being here. My first question is, when you look at a young Malaysian, Encik Ibrahim, what do you see? Lots of potential or lots of anxiety?
You see, when we talk about young Malaysians having anxiety, this has been happening since the dawn of time. Think about when this nation was new, when we fought for independence. It was the youth that wanted it. The anxiety, the aggression, the hope that was filled with the youth of the 1950s is no different from the youth of today. And that's why I think that when we look at the idea of what youth is all about, it's all about that. It's all about these feelings of anxiety, aggression, hopefulness, feeling of high level of empathy, if not sympathy for others. Those kind of elements are there. What gets worked out is in terms of, or the difference between today versus 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, is the level of education, the focus that we have when it comes to upbringing our talents and guiding them. Or there's a word that I heard from Datuk Nora Manaf, sponsorship. You sponsor that individual, sponsorship not in cash, but you encourage that person through its growth or his or her growth across the timeline. That is the only thing that is different today compared to before. And if you look at the kind of thinking that we have, we like to toss the words of mentors, coaches, gurus, those kind of things. It's not really how I would like to see it today. We tend to give that person a certification and then we just leave that person be.
Sure.
But that hand-holding, that level of guidance, the way we would our young children, up until their teenage years, up until their early adulthood. That is not seen when it comes to helping our talents figure things out by themselves.
Interesting. That connects to an idea that I've been kind of reflecting upon for some time, because in many systems, when we talk about ability and when we are trying to connect it to recognized talent, the recognized talent has to be visible, but they are not the same thing. Yeah, ability and recognized talent are not the same thing. So some people have ability, but they never develop into visible talent. And this is something that what Malcolm Gladwell said in his book. He said, systems convert ability into recognized success. You talked about Dato' Nora Manaf coming up with this idea of sponsorship. That's an interesting point. So can we just look at and say, how does that take place in Malaysia?
It's very tough right now, Tan Sri, because for the first time in human civilization, for real, we're having 6 generations working simultaneously in the workforce and trying to build a business together. We still have baby boomers, some of them holding podcasts, being a podcast host like you. We still have Generation X, Generation Y, the millennials, and Generation Alpha. They're all in the workforce as we speak.
Yeah, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
I don't know why you call me a baby boomer. I don't know what you are. Maybe you are Alpha, Gen Alpha. But one thing I'm sure that I left university before you were born.
Yeah, so you have that 5 generations. That's true, Tan Sri. But layering this is 1 generation more, which is non-human, AI generation. So now you have 6 generations in the workforce trying to make it work. It is near impossible. The thing now is people are living longer and working longer, as they should. I'm one of those proponents where the silver economy is, it needs to be worked out further, because we need more senior leaders continuing in the workforce today. People like you and people like Tun M. We need them. But we also need to be ready for my children to enter the workforce. I have a 19-year-old. She would be classified as a Gen Y, but my younger 2 are Gen Alphas, and they speak languages that I don't understand. Skibidi toilet, 6, 7, and my eldest understands them, and she understands me. I'm a millennial. But she has her own lingo as well. So this is where we look at this whole situation of, when you put all these various generations together in the workforce and try to make it work, friction is going to happen. Can we do enough in terms of sponsoring our talents, making sure that the friction or the generational friction at the workplace be reduced, and trying to see how we can work hand in hand with AI? All of them happening simultaneously,
Right.
It is a scary thought.
Right. So when you talk about sponsoring, so you just say, let's first recognize talent, support it, basically support it, and then reward it. And you also talked about 6 generations. That's something that I like, and it also brings in AI, which is a new one. And I remember sometimes my children said I must use more of AI, so I tried to use AI, and one day I was getting very annoyed with the responses AI was giving, and I kept on provoking, and finally the response came back and said, "Oh, come on, Tan Sri, let's move on." Yeah, so I was taken back. It was like my children talking to me.
Yeah.
But having said that, I just wanted to, so we talked about ability and we talked about visibility, okay? Because we need to convert that ability into something like recognized talent. It has to become visible. And I also want to just move on to something called access. Yeah, how do we get access? How do people with ability get access so that they could become recognized talent? I remember many years ago when I left university, I had 2 situations, and maybe as one who is tasked with developing young talent across the nation, maybe you could recognize it. One was, I applied to about 200 jobs in the private sector. I used to actually just keep a standard photocopied CV, put it in, and then just put this stamp on, and just keep posting and hoping for the next interview. Not much luck. And then a friend of mine came up to me and said, why don't you try the government? Why don't you join the public service? And I said, no, I didn't get any response. And there was this classic question the guy asked me, and he said, have you applied? I said, no, I haven't applied to the government service. And then the guy came back and said, my goodness me, what the heck? If you don't apply, how do you expect to get a job? I said, no, I applied to the private sector. And then the guy said, well, all you need is some support. You need to be navigated. But then I just looked at it at that particular point of my life. I didn't find that sponsorship. I didn't find that support. I just didn't find that privilege or that social network which development economists talk. Vincent Chu talked about it, and he said social networks give you tremendous access to get to where you are. What do you think about some people are more equal than others?
I think that this shouldn't be split in terms of wealth, economic wealth. I think it does translate into network of systems across societies.
Sure.
We used to have religious leaders, community leaders. We used to have leaders
Can
within.
I just stop there? I always believe that one of the guiding principles is talent is distributed well, but opportunity is not. So how do we access that?
Yeah, going back to what I said, the thing about having access to these kind of leaders are now strangely gone in the age of digital. There was a time when I was growing up and the imam in my area was very close to the family. My friends growing up in Johor Bahru were very plural. They had access to their religious leaders and they can actually guide them accordingly. That's one area. Community leaders are also an important part. Ketua Kampung, even though I grew up in Johor Bahru, the Ketua Kampung is still a Kampung leader. We still had that level of high authority towards that kind of reverence towards that kind of leader. But it also means that we had access to people that could guide us in certain respect. What is missing today in this digital age is that everybody tends to be more isolated than ever. There's a lot of scientific research that has shown that. And more importantly, these networks are not being translated into reasonable targets or reasonable goals for us to be coached or be coached and coaching others. This breakdown in terms of network amongst people is the one that is driving our talent world crazy. Because when we talk about ability and certifications, aplenty. Anybody can now get certified at the cheapest cost, at the fastest way possible. What's missing then is that network, and that's why at the work that we do at Yayasan Peneraju, for instance, we look at the types of leaders that we want to build: professional leader, business leader, and community leader. That community leader aspect is very much emphasized in what we do because we believe that many of us actually go through the pathway that you did, Azri, when you were a young man. Where was that coaching when you needed it then? And recognizing it that you needed it then enables you to understand that you need to give it out now to younger people today. That's one area of the community leader that we need to build. Another aspect of leader that we need to build are the professional leaders, where hopefully they can go big in their respective organizations and maybe become a CFO or a CEO. But quite frankly, roles are very limited. I mean, for Petronas, they hire 30,000, 40,000 people. One CEO. Khazanah, I don't know how many thousand they have, one CEO. So at the end of and most likely it's going to be politically appointed anyway. The idea here is, the reality is as such where if we set our talents to be a CEO, we're going to cut them loose in no time, and we're going to shortchange them in terms of hopes and expectations. That's why people have burnout. People have burnout not because they can't work hard. People can work hard. In fact, Malaysians work harder than most if you look at all the stats and study. But people get burnt out because the expectations do not meet the recognized realities of what they're facing. After you work in a large company like a bank, for instance, like Maybank or CIMB, after 5 years, many of them are jaded. So in the end, we need to build that third part of the leadership that we intend to do more, which is business leaders. Because believe it or not, there are a lot of Malaysians that are highly talented and highly capable to be commercially viable and run commercially strong enterprises, but were never given the option to do so. Think about it this way, Nazri. If we were a young person, and if we told our parents, if I want to be a professor, or I want to work in a big company, you're going to get a lot of support from your parents.
Sure.
How many parents would support if the child had that ambition of, I want to start a business. I don't want to go to university, or even if I do, I want to start a business, and I don't want to start working for another person. I don't want to apply. I just want to make sure that I'm commercially viable and I'll run a business now.
Sure.
9 out of 10 Malaysian parents would highly discourage the individual from starting a business. In fact, will start showering him or her with scary stories. Like, oh, remember this uncle, whatever, failed in business, auntie, whatever, didn't do much in life because, she didn't have a real job. Those kind of expectations.
Can I just quickly jump in before I forget? That's true.
Yeah.
Very few. I had a friend of mine whose son went to him and said, I want to become a gardener. The guy just went into a depression mode.
Yeah.
Never recovered. Until I told him gardener can also be a landscape architect.
Yeah.
And then he just said, oh, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So to wrap this up.
Why do you think that happens? Yeah.
The idea here is because they are going for the risk-averse option. And they want the best out of that person. So parents do that, don't do this, go with the safer option, and they want the best out of you. The issue here is the times that we live in is extremely different from the times that we grew up with.
Of course, yeah.
And if a person does not take the risk of trying to do something different from what we have grown up to be accustomed to, I think that is the time that we're going to fail. I think we have to be a little bit more risk sensitive, take calculated risks, no doubt, equip yourself with the best kind of ability and training that you can get, and most importantly, try and find networks that are outside of your circle.
Exactly.
And jump and do it. I think that's the only time that we need to do it now.
So, just going back to a point that you have been talking about in the last 2-3 minutes, which I've reflected upon that. So, how much of opportunity do you think there is in qualifications in Malaysia for ability to become visible talent? But how do I access it? So, what role does qualifications play?
Very important, especially roles that have a very vocational or a technical aspect to it. I think we do not have the luxury, and you may disagree with me considering that you're from a university. I think the role of universities have to change. We no longer have the luxury of teaching our young philosophy and economics and politics. I think the role of universities are now more on equipping our talents with hard skills, not soft skills, hard skills, coding, mathematics, law. Because law, even though it borders on philosophy, it has that operational element to it. Perhaps even shorten the studying period. 120 credit hours for a bachelor's degree doesn't cut it anymore. When you have a double degree, Sharia law and civil law at 148 hours, you're depriving that talent from starting early in the workforce. You're competing against not fellow universities. You're competing against professional certifications that have high value when industry sees it, they recognize it of a certain talent. You're depriving qualifications that are very quick in nature.
Sure.
You have since you run a university, you know how MQA processes take. The time that you submit for MQA approval, by the time they get approved, that syllabus is somewhat obsolete already, or you may need to update it.
In the current context.
In the current context, yeah. Worse still, some degrees, like computer science degree, the things that you are teaching in the second year, the student goes into the second year, the first year was obsolete. Right now it's faster. Things that you learn the second semester, the things that you learn the first semester is already obsolete.
But one of the things there which I'd like to just bring back is sometimes it's not so much about the subject. So one of the key things that our Vice Chancellor always talks about is value-based education. It's about how do we get people to think? How do we get people to solve problems? And that's key, rather than just basically looking at a content just for the sake of the content. We have to apply the context too. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, I disagree. I'm so sorry, Tan Sri. I disagree because I think that people start to think when they have drama in their life, when their back is against the wall, when they are married and they're 24 and then they suddenly get pregnant, that's when they really start to
But
troubleshoot
then,
solutions.
education has to be. I do agree with you on one thing, that is, it has to have a broad appeal. So important for people to learn philosophy, important for people to learn drama, music,
Absolutely.
because there's so much that we learn.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we are also living in a society that's kind of credentials.
Yeah.
So we have credentials. So how do I structure and how do I compare apple to apple? So if I say someone is a professional engineer or someone is a professional accountant, I need to structure the syllabus, don't I?
Yes, you do, but then you have the professional certifications to do it for you. The idea here is if you want to start a business, today I want to start a business selling this coffee table. You need to know a few things: your supply chain, your market size, how you get the quality of the thing, the marketing aspect of it, digital marketing. Do you want to do TikTok live to start selling this thing? All of that, I think, is only applicable if you know the operational stuff of it.
Sure.
If I take PPE from Oxford University, I'm not too sure how that can make me sell this table better.
Sure.
You might even question, do we even need a table?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so are we in the business of developing thinkers, or are we in the business of equipping our talents with the best skill sets so that they can survive? I am going down on the path of that, actually.
Well, it's a contested subject, isn't
That's
it?
why
Some people say
that's why people don't want to invite me to. Anything I say is highly contestable.
Well, one of the things is we do want people to solve problems, but obviously I think skills in today's context is such an important one. And I think one of the challenges that we as a society have today is skills are getting, unfortunately, obsolete too fast, too soon.
Yeah.
So how do you at Yayasan Peneraju deal with that problem? The skills get obsolete so fast that I got to continue to learn all the time.
We do it. We address it directly in three ways. Number one, we took off the cap of people applying for age cap. People applying for further
It's
studies.
lifelong learning. Yeah?
Lifelong learning. Second, we take off the cap on income restrictions.
Sure.
Previously, only B40 could apply. Now, even T20 can apply because it doesn't make sense for the privilege.
But is that equitable?
It is.
Why
because
not?
third,
Why can't T20 pay for it?
yeah. Third, we took off the scholarship element. Everything is loan now.
Okay.
So B40 wants to study, go ahead. You study, you get good grades. It's a convertible
So
loan.
T20 can also apply for a loan.
Yeah. So the idea here is because lifelong learning happens every time. This year, in my role, HR directly reports to me. Previously, it was reporting to a corporate services head. So as we speak right now, I'm taking SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. That's right. It teaches you a few things, both principle as well as applied science on HR management. The year before, I took CPA because I'm now in charge of public accounting.
Sure.
The years before, I took business operations. The years before, I took.
So you are a living example of lifelong.
Yeah,
learning.
because when I did capital markets, nobody knew how to teach me in a structured fashion, right? What I'm trying to say is the courses that I take is relevant for me at that moment in time, and that moment in time enables me to learn and appreciate the course better. What is scary is people just want to take courses for the sake of it that have no relevance to that person's life whatsoever.
They do just want to get a qualification.
That's scary because what are you doing with your life? You're just a serial certified hunter. You're not really moving the needle on the economic space on yourself. So what I'm trying to say is lifelong learning is important, but only relevant to that time and place. And most importantly, how is that relevant to you at that moment in time? Now, you can retain the lessons so that you now have a very diverse skill set that you can apply later on in life in other roles and other forms. But if it's not applicable and relevant to you now, why waste time? Do the job that is needed today.
So if you take ability, you take for it to become visible talent, and I think as Yayasan Peneraju, you've described how you provide the access. It's loans, irrespective of income, irrespective of age. So you're trying to actually get that conversion to talent happen, as Marshall Goldsmith said, Malcolm Gladwell and Marshall Goldsmith said, that we want to get that conversion from ability to talent. But one of the challenges that we have seen is, are we having these conversations too late? At 22, when you have a talent conversation with someone, the inequality is already embedded. So how do we deal with that? And one of the things that Epstein said in his famous work on range is that sometimes, like Roger Federer, wants that exposure. He wants to sample many sports before he picks on his passion, tennis. And that's that's because he is learning tennis in a wicked learning environment. He just tries out many things. Whereas someone like Tiger Woods plays golf, and it's a kind learning environment. You talked about sponsorship. The dad sponsors him, and that ability is converted into visible talent, primarily because there's access, and that conversion happens very well. So how do we kind of make sure that people choose a path?
Choose a vocation accordingly.
Correct.
That
Exactly.
is most suited for that talent's aptitude.
Is it early or late, or do we give people a
To answer this
sample?
question, we have to go a little bit
Sure,
further behind.
please.
In the 70s, Malaysians' life expectancy was at a very tender age of 55. 1990s, it crept up to around 68, 69. Today, Malaysians' life expectancy is 78.
Okay.
Singapore, 86. What I'm trying to say is, with the advent of technology, with healthier living, and younger Malaysians don't take
Sure.
sugar as much
Sure.
as people our
Sure.
age. We're going to expect Malaysians to live longer. The most wicked policy that is still in effect is having a mandatory retirement age. That whole concept to me is nonsensical. We should not have a mandatory retirement age. We should not have even a voluntary retirement age.
But how do we then actually plan the economics? Because you want to give the space to younger people. Yeah?
I am of the belief that with 34 million folks that we have right now, we need all hands on deck. Now, in what role and in what capacity? Sure. I mean, you can't expect a 57-year-old lady to function as productive as a 25-year-old man.
Sure, certainly.
You can't. But that 57-year-old lady has so much institutional knowledge that her role should be retrofitted to something else. In football or in tennis or whatever, you have coaches. It's just bizarre that in Malaysian corporate space or in Malaysian business space, there's not much coaches to speak of. These kind of people needs to be repurposed into that kind of role. In Japan, how they facilitate senior workers.
Your roles evolve.
That's right. So that whole human management and human resource management needs to be looked at in a very holistic aspect. We're going to have to face realities where there's going to be a sandwich society. That particular workforce is supporting
6 generations.
That's right. So it's a club sandwich or a murtabak, if you may, where it's super stacked against each other. Only one generation is working to support 2 generations below and 3 generations up, with an AI generation that is going to work alongside that particular generation. It's crazy for us to retire some of these senior citizens and let them be working off the social security. That's not viable. What's viable is we continue prolonging them in the workforce, ensuring that they remain competitive and productive, making sure that institutional wealth is shared across the generations. Yeah, so that is one area. That is why I think that, for us to say at 22 or 23, choose your vocation or stay in it, I think that is the wrong way of approaching things. Take a look at my own history. I started off because I had very, very poor grades, I couldn't secure a job even after 1 year of graduating. So I worked as a political secretary.
But we want to build capability and nurture it often.
The idea here is to try your hand in an area where you think that you could. That's right. Then I moved into banking, then I moved into broadcasting, now I'm in public service. What I'm trying to say is these industries are so diverse These are the kind of things that needs to be happening today with other talents as well. If you have a degree in engineering, you're not condemned to be an engineer for the rest of your life. You have to have the ability to be nimble and go into other areas.
You want to convert that ability into talent. That's
And the
visible.
only way for you to do that, that conversion can only happen with ongoing lifelong learning. And of course, if the certifications can come along with that, then so be it. If not, informal trainings, whatever it is, you can't be condemned in one area or for the rest of your life. That is why, to answer your question directly, Tan Sri, it is rather strange for us to look at choosing a vocation at an early age or a young age,
Sure.
because I think that you should choose your vocation if it suits you at that particular moment in time, and have the courage and ability and the brevity to actually change course if it needs to.
See, one of the challenges that I've always found, that I've always asked young people who want to become medical doctors or engineers, why would they actually want to do that? And they always say, look, we want to minimize inequality between
The poorest people are the doctors
poorest
right now in
people.
Malaysia.
Yeah, of course.
Strangely enough.
Of course, but the perception is
Yeah,
otherwise,
your doctor and
perception is
the
otherwise.
Asian parenting.
They feel that, look, I want to become a doctor because my father told me, my mother told me, because the job is more secure. So it's again going back to sponsorship, coaching, supporting. But really, the Malaysian government isn't also just talking; it's also acting. I think they've made this very explicit by making TVET a very clear pathway towards skills development in order to meet industry demand. And we also know that they are not talking about credential accumulation. They're talking about recognizing prior learning. I think you talked about MQA a little earlier. They talked about APEL-C, APEL-Q, APEL-A, and they're talking about all of those in order to allow lifelong learning. And of course, ASEAN governments are also not sitting quiet. They're also saying, how can we go towards talent development? And in Singapore, the Singapore Skills Future Initiative, they want to make sure, the core idea is everyone should learn throughout, because like what you just said, sometimes skills get obsolete so frequently that we want to be continuously reskilling and upskilling and all of that. So what do we need to do in Malaysia? We don't want to copy any other model because we have our own kind of, what shall I say, niche. And therefore, what do you think, as someone who has been Yayasan Peneraju, I'm sure you've had many success stories and you've had some challenges, but given all of that, because no initiative can just be successful, it's always going to have challenges. What do you think that Malaysian model, because given talent development, should be?
I go back to basics. I look at some of the more interesting nations that we can model ourselves after.
Sure.
Even if it is as painful as saying that we could model ourselves against Singapore. Being a Johorian, that hurts me more saying it than you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
But if you look at these countries, Sweden, Norway, Hong Kong, Singapore, India, UK, and you start doing that whole very linear mathematics in terms of certifications against the ratio of people having it, you will quickly realize that we may have an oversupply of a certain area of people and a severe undersupply of other areas.
Sure.
Yayasan Peneraju is collaborating very closely with Talent Corp under the Ministry of Human Resources, and being under the Ministry of Economy, we start to realize that there are 10 to 20 critical areas that we need to shore up very quickly. Number one, people having CFA charter status. Number two, charter accountant. Number three, medical doctors. And we can go on throughout the whole list and try to understand a little bit better in terms of these are the areas that even if we could close the gap, we would need tens of thousands of people in these areas right now as we speak. And why do we need to do that? Because if you want an area of concern to be addressed, you need the right talents to address it, and you need the right network to build that particular solution collectively as a cohort to solve that particular problem. Now, what I'm trying to also say is that if we want to do that, we have to invest in education so much so that we have to apportion a lot more of our scholarships into these areas. A lot more. I don't have the numbers with me. But whatever the number is in terms of us spending for education, especially in this area, it needs to be 10x or fivefold. It has to be a lot more. And it's not about enriching the training providers or universities and all that.
Sure.
It is about ensuring that we have the right skill sets and invest in that. Because without that particular investment, I don't know whether we can achieve whatever they want to talk about. TVET is a good area, but what I'm trying to also say is that in our analysis of our subjects of areas of concern, professional pathway is desperately needed. TVET, we're kind of okay in terms of the numbers of growth that we have. In about 10 years' time, the ratio of people having qualification in wireman, in plumbing, in chargeman, all that, will be about the same as the countries that I just spoke of just now.
Sure.
So it's not that far of a game in terms of us shoring up that particular area. My sister, who is living in Sweden who has been living in Sweden for the past 20 years, she could fix her own sink. I was visiting her last summer. There was a clog. She immediately went to the shed, solved it for herself.
Everything is DIY, yeah?
Because it's 200 crowns an hour if she calls in the plumber. And she's like, I miss Malaysia.
You know, I heard this little story in Australia.
Yeah.
The famous cardiologist who charges whatever, huge fees, and he just calls up the plumber, and the plumber fixes it, and he gets very angry to hear what the fees was. It's 5,000 Australian dollars or something, and the guy gets upset, and the plumber says, I can understand, that's why I gave up cardiology and plumber. So it's high value. So it's high value, skills are highly valued, and it's also a high income. But to get there, I think it takes a little while.
But do you agree that we need to invest a lot more?
Of course, of course.
With our people and training?
Absolutely. And also we have to uplift that image. I think that was the first thing you said. Parents want their children to become graduates. But graduates do not necessarily command the same salary in many other high skills environment. Let's say, for example, if you are a welding specialist underwater, you probably make 20,000.
Definitely.
20,000, 30,000. But just getting back to Malaysian workforce and graduate statistics, Bernama report says the number of graduates in Malaysia reached about 6 million in the year 2024, and the graduate unemployment rate, though declined, many were underemployed, so they were not getting the right wages, and that brings about a lot of dissatisfaction. Because ability is there, but it's not converted into talent.
And this is the main problem actually. Are we sure that we're getting the best people to do graduate degrees? I think you may agree with me that the quality of our graduates have dropped, not necessarily because the institutions that teach them are poor. It's because the crop was poor to begin with.
Well, thank you. It's good to hear that when I come from a university.
But what does that mean? That means that those kind of talents, while they may not necessarily be suited to go for a graduate program, they may very well be suited for other programs that we need, that is needed.
But I think it works both ways. I think we need good students, we need good teachers, we
Correct.
need good universities.
But when we have the right...
But we also need the right choice.
Yes, and the right people to go to the right programs. The thing about our graduates right now is many of our graduates are deprived of good positions, going to good universities because it's already full. And are you sure that the quantum that we have right now at the universities are the right quantum that we need to have? So there's a lot of explanation that is needed by the government in terms of how we streamline our people from the education process, from the K-12 all the way to university. That's number one. Number two, in Singapore, the ratio is 1 to 150 of people having chartered status accounting. In Malaysia, it's 1 in 800. Theoretically, if we were to get to the same ratio of 1 to 150, we need 175,000 qualified professional accountants. Today we have 40,000. So that means we are short of 130,000 certified chartered accountants. For CFA, same thing. For chartered actuary, people that are supposed to work in our, takaful and insurance.
Many professions have that. Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that 6 million number that we have, they were not needed by the government or the industry.
Sure.
And that's why many of them are underemployed. And it's sad because they spent 4 years, maybe even 6 years after you
and they don't use that learning to
yeah,
any productive
and it's a waste. It's a waste of everybody's time and resources.
And we also have this huge nursing shortage today, and most of our nurses are also pinched
In
by
Saudi
other countries.
I got a cousin, first cousin. Her mom and my mom are sisters. She's in Saudi, making 20K US.
Well, just take Singapore. They all walk across to Singapore.
Yeah, so and she's a registered nurse. She's an RM.
Yeah.
I was asking her, you never want to come back to Malaysia? She's like, why? Salary's going to be 3K.
Okay, I know there was this very critical article in the newspapers about Talent Corp, but I do know that Talent Corp does a lot of good work as well, because anytime you try to do so, what Talent Corp try to do is to get back the brain drain to become a brain gain with a lot of initiatives. But having said all of that, I do know that Malaysia, particularly Yayasan Peneraju, has rightly invested in the Bumiputra empowerment, because national capacity depends on the majority of our citizens. And I think that's something very important, because we want to kind of upgrade the national capacity. But having said that, how do we also design efforts so that other Malaysians also feel included in the opportunity?
Yeah, no, this is a question that needs to be answered directly, because I think that while our efforts are gravely needed in terms of helping the Bumiputra,
which is very good, yeah.
I'm very concerned about other Malaysians that needs that kind of support as well.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. CFA. We're supposed to have, if we were to pretend to be wanting to be a financial center of Asia,
sure,
in the likes of Hong Kong and Singapore, we need to build a further 20,000 CFA charter holders. Currently, we have 1,400 CFA charter holders in Malaysia as we speak, and we need 20,000. It's a very, very difficult certification to go after, but it's a possible certification to go after if you have the right sponsorship, mentoring, financing, and so on.
Sure.
1,200 of that 1,400, i.e. 1,200 out of the 1,400 is Chinese. Roughly just a touch under 200 are Malays. Only a handful of Indian, and no representation of Bumiputra of other races. You know, Kadazan Dusun, Bugis, Iban, whatever you have. It's scary because there's no efforts to grow that in a very deliberate manner, to grow Indian CFA charter holders, to grow other races charter holders. And I'm not saying it's never about taking it away from
But there is Mitra, right? So
there is Mitra, and hopefully
what are they doing?
That's the thing. If Mitra can transform under Dr. Ramanan, Dato Sri, I think now.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful, and I think that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just do whatever Yayasan Peneraju does, and just copy paste, and we can do it, because that 200 of that Bumiputra CFA charter holders, 100 of that 200 was garnered by Yayasan Peneraju. I.e., without Yayasan Peneraju, we would still have about 100 Bumiputra charter holders.
So, yeah, one of the key things that Heckman says is, developmental economists always talk about is minimize inequality, because national harmony and goodwill always builds up when no one is left behind.
Yeah. And coming from the viewpoint of equity and not equality, we need to have a lot more representation from communities that are underserved and underrepresented.
Certainly.
And if it means aggressive
development,
quota
focus,
then so be it. If we have 100 seats to train people with CFA, then 10 at least must be Indians, and a further 10 from other races, so that we can have that firm hard commitment that we want to grow these areas. And I think that space is still poorly looked at, quite frankly, Tan Sri.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I'm concerned. I really am. My daily concern is the Bumiputera representation.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's where the salary comes in. But the more concerned citizen aspect is, where is that aggressive equity push to ensure that everybody doesn't get left behind?
Thank you, sir. Just as we come to the close of the podcast, Ibrahim, I am a great follower of Amartya Sen, the development economist, who said a job
Nobel Prize winner
alone,
at that.
a job alone doesn't translate into dignity or choice. Because Amartya Sen, the famous example often said is, a man can fast or a man can starve because of poverty. Maybe both are the same, but the person's choice is different. So a person must have the freedom of choice. So if any young Malaysian of any background, I think you talked about Bumiputra of any background, others from, let's say, Borneo, or let's say Indians or Chinese, or Eurasians for that matter, asked you what really matters for building a meaningful future, very meaningful future, what would you say to that young person, sir?
I think that young Malaysian needs to get involved in politics. I think that is the only way for that person to make meaningful change. And what do I mean by that? I'm not saying that, okay, you go, stand for election in the upcoming, elections.
Get more conscious of
Get more conscious awareness. You're living in a country filled with human beings. Start connecting physically with the people that are around you.
Sure.
I am very surprised. My son today is 14 years old. He actually left home and walked to KLCC to meet with his friends. This is the first time he is actually going to meet his friends outside of school. It's a very strange moment for me.
Sure.
Unlike the sisters are highly social creatures. So I'm very happy that he's trying to connect with human beings in a physical way.
Yeah, that's nice.
I think you need to start
Rather than
with
hang
that.
on the phone, yeah?
No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It does not work. You need to be engaged with your community, and to do so, you have to get
That's
out.
good. That's true.
And talk about anything, right?
That's
I mean, we have this big drama right now with the local council elections in KL. Some are pro, some are anti. I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
I think
it's a different opinion. It's a contest
yeah,
of
and
ideas.
talk it out and understand each other's points of views.
And accept at the end of the day, it's the views of the majority, but the minority is also considered. So there is a debate, a discussion.
That is what I'm trying to say. For people coming from any background or any creed, any economic station in life, if you are not engaged with your communities, you are off to a poorer start.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So thank you so much for being here. As we have discussed today, the Malaysian talent question is not choosing between degree, skills, or experience. And as NJ Ibrahim Sani from Yayasan Peneraju so eloquently expressed, it's about you making the right choices. It's about making sure ability for it to become visible, to access the right opportunities, to convert it into visible talent, and finally have a sense of belonging. You must be involved with your community, whatever that is. And it's also about sponsorship, as he so very positively said it. It's about whether our systems are able to recognize ability, provide guidance, open pathways, and give people a real sense that they belong. Talent is not just something that individuals possess. It's something societies either enable or waste. At the future of Malaysia's competitiveness, cohesion, confidence will depend on how we answer that question together. As we leave you, just please remember, talent fails not because ability is absent, but because pathways are unclear, access is uneven, and belonging breaks down. Remember, as NJ Ibrahim said, 6 generations we lived together. And as he brought an example, his son went out to KLCC to engage with the community, forgetting the telephone. So forget the phone, engage with people, your community, and start your journey of talent discovery and talent development. Thank you, terima kasih, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Very delightful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Subscribe now and tap the bell icon.